Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Well, hello there, my friend. Welcome to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Brad Wilson. And today's guest on the show is the author of Scoop Winning High-Low Concepts for the Hold'em Mind, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, Greg Vail. Greg's a red chip poker coach and cash game pro who specializes in the world of Big O and Omaha high-low. Greg's poker career is split into two acts. The first act was 2005 through 2010, when he was a young, immature kid with horrible spending habits and very little discipline trying to figure out how to navigate the world. Spoiler alert, that didn't end so well. So, recognizing he needed to disrupt his lifestyle, Greg joined the Army in 2010 until he was medically discharged in 2015. Act 2 began in 2015 when Greg fell back into the world of poker, except this time he was a totally different human being who had gained some much needed maturity and discipline. Since then, he's written 3 books, has helped student after student learn how to improve their split pot skills, and lives for providing and raising his daughter. In today's episode, you're going to learn why Greg chooses to play and teach split pot games, the lessons and wisdom Greg took with him from the Army into poker, how teaching others how to play the game of poker has helped both Greg and myself become better players, and much, much more. So without any further ado, I bring to you my conversation with author and coach, Greg Vail. Greg, good afternoon, sir. How you doing?
Hey, buddy. Good. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Welcome to the show. Very happy to have you here. To kick things off, typically start by asking you about your journey through poker. Like, where did you find poker? What does that look like?
Way back. So I'm one of the original moneymaker crowd, I guess.
We all are.
Yeah, I know, right? We're not the poker newbies anymore. We're the people now.
Yeah, I remember going to the table and always being the youngest person there for many years. And now sometimes I go to tables and I'm like the oldest person.
Dude, I play Big O in Omaha all the time. I'm always the youngest person at the
That's
table.
True. That's a good point.
Yeah, so I'm one of that crowd. I went to college. I started college in 2003 at Arizona State. And that was the perfect timing because it was in the fall, and that's when ESPN was airing the 2003 World Series. So I had a bunch of roommates from Boston who were a bunch of degens and everything. We couldn't even play around a golf without making 100 bets on something. And, they got me into poker. And that took me, I was just obsessed with the idea that it was a skill game. And I had no idea. It was like when I was 18, I thought it was just gambling. I thought it was no different from anything else that would fit into that definition. So once I figured out that it was, a skill game, I was just obsessed with it. And I dove in pretty hard into learning. And once I realized that there was this whole skill set that I didn't even know existed, it fascinated me.
Why was the aspect of it being a skill game, why did that resonate with you so much? Like growing up in life, were you involved in competitions? Was that something you were actively striving to be like the best at the best you could be at the endeavors that you chose?
Yeah, it was, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, I've always, when I take on something, I want to master it and then move on, and so I grew up playing golf and I went to college for golf at ASU and, that was always my focus. And, I saw a lot of similarities between golf and poker. And then I don't know. It was an interesting kind of awakening when I realized that I had this lifelong held belief that was completely false. And I was like, wow, I have to educate myself. Just like this, giant haymaker of ignorance just hit right in the chin. Like I need to fix this. And it was fascinating. I dove in, and then, I used 2004. It took me like, that was my, like, when the curve started going upwards. And in '05, I quit my job for poker because it was not I want to be a pro. It was, my job is costing me money now. And, I was making 3 times more than I was working playing cards. So I thought work got in the way, and here we are 15 years later.
Yeah, did you talk to your parents about the decision? I assume you had no responsibilities in life.
When I was 20.
Yeah.
It was, they weren't happy about it. Actually, they didn't turn around. My parents didn't turn around to the idea of poker until after I got out of the Army. Because in 2010, I decided to change. I wanted to make a huge change. I did not like the poker lifestyle. I didn't.
Let's talk about that. Like you quit your job because you're making more money than you were capable of in, you said 2005?
It was '05, yeah.
'05. So from '05 to 10, what happened that led you to joining the Army?
It wasn't one thing in particular. It was just kind of a culmination of things at the perfect time. And my entire family's been in the military going back, 5 generations. Like, I was the last male holdout that had not been in the military, and it was something I always wanted to do, but I never had the opportunity. And then, so after 5 years of playing cards for a living, I had a lot of bad habits. Any immature kid with, playing cards for a living, like, bad shit happens.
Do dumb stuff.
Oh yeah. God, it was terrible. Bad spending habits. I had zero money management, no discipline, and I was doing well because, if back in those days, if you could just, I don't know, count to 5, you could probably win at poker, and it was like, after a while, it just got old, and when I had a realization in, like, I think it was 2009 or '08, something like that, where I stayed at the Rio for 3 weeks during the series and realized I hadn't seen the sun in like 25 days or something stupid like that. I was like, this is bad, man. Something's got to change. And then in right in the beginning of 2010, I had a 5-year relationship that ended, and that was like the last thing tethering me to that lifestyle.
Why did it end? It just fizzled out on its own accord?
No, she went her own way.
Okay. So
she went her own way, and
made you reflect on your life and everything that's happening. Especially, it's hard, you're a kid. You don't know how to live a fulfilling, balanced life when you come up through poker, right? Like, the one thing that the kids nowadays who come up in the game have that folks like you or me, and God only knows what the people before us had, was the ability to have a mentor, right? To seek out wisdom of the lifestyle. We were just making up the rules as we went along.
That's so true. We absolutely were making it up as we go along, and it was so wrong. Look back now, I'm like, oh my God, if I could go back to '05, oh man, I would be done. Right now, I'd be on the way. I'd be in a beach somewhere.
Yeah, but unfortunately, you can't go back in time and retroactively. It was. I think too, there are some benefits of youth, especially as it relates to, like, just naive optimism of things will work out. I think that was something that I had early in my career when I didn't know my head from a hole in the ground. Was like, well, whatever. Like, if it doesn't work out, I'll just do something else. Like,
just go in more.
I'll just go in more. Like, I had multiple situations where I just stake a friend, and he's like, oh, I got second for, $50K. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, I just added $25K to my bankroll, staking my friend in this silly little tournament. Like, just these things just kind of organically happen. I don't know. Like, I have a lot of luck to be grateful for those experiences, but you don't know what you don't know, and when you're ignorant, there's a fearlessness that comes with that youth that is, in my opinion, a little bit envious. Just, you're bulletproof, right?
Yeah. Well, you think you are. Yeah.
You think you are. You think you're bulletproof.
I look back at it now, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, the exact player that I was, that's the people I prey on now. I'm like, oh man, I was so bad. Like, how did I make a living?
Because they were worse.
Because everybody, oh God. I mean, those are the glory days. 05 to 10, like those were the days where you didn't, oh my God, you could be just a total nit. And I mean, if you played 12% of your hands, you'd probably still grind out a solid living, and that's just, you can't do that anymore, like ever. It just doesn't work that way anymore.
You just get destroyed.
Yeah, you get absolutely ripped apart. And, it's a lot of those things that I didn't know then. I learned from the Army, ironically, weirdly enough, doing a total 180 in life. And, and once I realized that I was going to be medically retired in 15, well, I found out in 14, but once I realized I was on the way out and there was nothing I could do in the military anymore, and I go right back to poker, and it was just like a totally different person.
Tell me about this transition from
oh man,
the poker. I know myself in 2010 is not a very pretty picture. Going from the poker lifestyle to the Army, that had to be quite the scenery change.
Oh, it was something else, and that it provided me a lot of things, in good, both good and bad, and it was such an eye-opening experience. And I enlisted at 26, which is a grandfather in Army standards. And, I would originally wanted to go into the Air Force to do launch rockets because I'm a science nerd. And they told me I was either I had a 50-50 shot of Vandenberg, California or Minot, North Dakota. And I said, nope, not doing that coin flip. and so then my next idea was to be an officer in the Marines, because I've been in martial arts my whole life, and the fight or flight instinct, there is no second half of that equation, Yeah. And so there were some restrictions on the officer program, and it was going to take a long time to get in. And I wanted to go in now. So I took my packet over to the Army and asked for an infantry slot, and they sent me off right away. And, a few months later, I wake up in the infantry at Fort Hood, in the end of 2011, and realize I'm in a platoon full of kids, with a 20-year-old who's never held a job in his life, trying to tell me what to do with my money and my everything. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. I'm like, this is not going to go well. And so after about a year in the infantry, doing nothing but training, because my unit was not deployable at the time, I decided I was going to go into Special Forces. And so I dropped my packet the day I was eligible, and I went off to selection, was picked up first time go, and off I went. That was more my crowd. That was more, I was usually the youngest person around, usually people in their late 20s was about it.
Yeah. Tell me about that transition into Special Forces, because that's a different animal than the infantry.
Those are my people, man. Those are everything they were, and everything the unit stood for, and why people were there was what I wanted out of the military. It was people who wanted to do the good work, the hard work, but the only thing they really cared about was the guy next to them. There was no competition between anybody. We were a team, every sense of the word, and the meaning behind everything we're doing. It was always a clear, giant national, this matters. There was no picking up trash on post. There's none of that stuff.
How did that feel, going from poker, which doesn't always give human beings this sense of camaraderie, brotherhood, right, or fulfillment ultimately?
That's a good point.
To have that brotherhood, I imagine that probably felt really nice.
It was liberating is a good word. It was just what I needed at the time, and the lessons that I learned were just incredible. And it did not take long before I started drawing parallels between my former career and the military. And, stuff like one of the mottos that we were taught from day one was, we are not special operators. We are not more advanced soldiers. We're not anything special. We're just the same as you guys, as everybody else. The only thing that sets us apart is we're a master of the basics, and routinely master the basics. And when I heard that from, one of the cadre, the teachers at the Q course, when I heard that, I immediately thought about poker. I was like, holy crap, that's all it is. I'm like, that's all it is to be better than, a vast majority, is to master the basics. And as long as you have that, then you have the foundation to move forward. And it just clicked. I'm like, holy crap, now I'm going to go play cards.
It's fundamentals, right? Like it's just being strong, having strong fundamentals, and that will take you to places that you can't even imagine as it relates to poker career and multiple other careers, right? Like there's a stat. It was Klay Thompson. He set the 3-point record in a playoff game for Golden State one year. Mm-hmm. It was something like 14 threes or something like that. And I remember reading about it. And you know how many dribbles he took before he shot those?
Probably exactly the same.
One. He
took the exact same one.
No. He took one dribble, period. It was just catch and shoot, right? Like just catch and shoot, catch and shoot. And it's like, yeah, people work on a bunch of things that don't ultimately matter, but master your fundamentals, master your jumper, and you reach heights that you just can't otherwise. It's not sexy. It's not sexy sitting there practicing your jumper 5 hours a day or practicing like your pre-flop play and no limit hold'em. Like it's not fun. It's not sexy, but it's necessary.
Yeah. And that's actually what everything you just said the last 30 seconds is exactly what started my first book. It's literally like word for word what started it. Is that when I realized my military career was coming to an end after getting hurt about 4 times too many, and all I was doing was going to medical appointments and out processing and ready to go home, and what's next. And I found a few card games in Raleigh, and where I was stationed at the time. It was Fort Bragg, but Raleigh was about 70 miles north. And I found a bunch of home games, was playing a lot more cards, obviously, because I only had to go to work once a week. And a friend of mine, Sean Dees, who is the ultimate inspiration for my first book, was this wonderful Hold'em player. Was very effective at Hold'em, knew his stuff, knew all his. But when he went to play high-low, he just never win. And so that fundamental disconnect, why can somebody be very, very good at something else, at one thing, and then use the exact same system and completely suck? I'm like, how is that possible? And then I realized there's a Hold'em mind, there's a single pot mind, and then there's a split pot mind. They are not the same. So I built a paper. I started writing a paper for him, which was just I want him to do better. That's all it was. And outlining the fundamentals that weren't there. And just the basics, and building on a foundation. I figured, he was smart enough that once I gave him the basics, he would figure it out from there. And so I gave him the paper, and it just clicked. Well, that paper, then I expanded the paper more and more and more. Eventually it was 100-something pages. And then Redship got a hold of it, and through coincidence, there's a random meeting, and they wanted to publish it. And that led to the first book. And then I went out on my own for 2, 3, and 4. But,
what was the name of the first book? I've only seen Scoop. That's
the black cover. Scoop is volume 1. It's Big O and PL08. It's winning high-low concepts for the Hold'em mind. And that I wanted to make that pretty clear that I'm addressing the Hold'em mind. I'm addressing everybody who knows Hold'em and wants to move into anything else, because everybody who learns poker knows how to play Hold'em. So it's not really, I'm not really marketing to a niche people that only play high-low. It's, we created something for people to understand, Hold'em. Now let's move into something else.
Hold'em has become just synonymous with poker in general. Right. So like it's basically for people that are playing poker, because pretty much everybody in the game nowadays, we just know how to play Hold'em. We know what Hold'em is. It's just the primary game. And you're right. Like there are some other just amazing poker games that are valuable and require different skill sets. Like
different skill sets. Yeah.
I came up playing limit Hold'em. I won because players were really, really bad. And when the players got better, I stopped winning at limit Hold'em. And to be honest, I was never a very strong limit Hold'em player. And I never enjoyed playing limit Hold'em. Like it was just like, I go to the commerce and I'm playing the 40-80. And like, I just
don't love this. Like I like having the spectrum of bet sizes. I like the puzzle of like the no limit aspect of it. And that's what resonated with me. But, Big O, Omaha high low, there is certainly a market for people who love playing cards to learn those games. It's like another thing that I've said on this show multiple times, like the people that learn mixed games at the casino have this natural built-in edge whenever a whale or somebody wants to play a game and they're like, okay, we're going to play a 3-game mix. Well, you just eliminated 97% of the players from the casino from sitting down in that game. And now you're just going to play 3 or 4-handed,
Right. And that's, a really good point, and I've found so many advantages in single pot games that I learned from split pot games, but that was, that's the really hard part about getting what originally was getting the idea wrapped around my head and like accepting the fact that when somebody says, I want to publish this book and I think you should coach, I'm like, dude, I can barely even find a Big O game to play in, much less a market for people who want to learn it. And I have never been more happy to be so wrong in my life. It was like just at, a flood of people. And even to this day, my schedule is always full with teaching people to get better at split pot games. And, I didn't think there was a market for that, but I was wrong. That's great. I was so happy to be wrong.
Well, whenever you're one of the only coaches, I mean, you get all the supply, right? Like, I think.
Yeah, that seems to be the thing. I keep looking. I'm waiting for somebody else to publish a book on Big O. And I'm like, because I want more information. I want to compare. I want to, get better and learn somebody else's way of doing things. That's if hopefully somebody is more effective, so I can learn too. And like, I keep routinely, I've heard it probably 6-7 times. Oh, I thought about writing a book and then I didn't do it. And, then yours came along and half the stuff you're going to say I was going to write. I was like, well, do it anyway.
Say the other half.
Yeah. Like then do it anyway. It's what do you got to lose? And, originally that was a couple of friends of mine, are like, I don't think there's no Big O book. There's no market for it. I don't mind being the second or the third person in the market. I don't want to be the first. And then, if it goes bad, you'll look, I'm like, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care. It works for me. So
it's
if like somebody doesn't like it, then whatever.
It's an asymmetrical risk, right? Like if it doesn't do well, then nothing happens. And if it does do well, then you have a steady stream of students and steady stream of revenue for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, my original, I guess, motivation for writing my first book, and now 4, was I wanted to bring more people into the game, because I loved playing Big O and I loved playing split pot games. They were better games. They were always more fun. People played for longer. People didn't hit and run. People weren't being idiots with the hoodies and sunglasses and all that nonsense. Like they weren't doing that because it was just a more social environment and I enjoyed it. I just flat enjoyed it. I won more often. I was more effective and I wanted more people in the game. So I thought, the best way to, bring some players into the fold is to give them a foundation to start. And maybe they'll take, they'll play after reading a book, and they did. It certainly worked. I routinely am told, hey, I got into Big O after reading your books, and then somebody shows up with, some total trash hand. I'm like, well, I don't want to hear about what you did not, or don't tell anybody you read that from me. But, and it worked, but apparently there's a lot bigger market than I thought, which I was pleasantly surprised by.
Yeah. And, the books that come afterwards are likely going to be from one of your disciples, right? Somebody that has
there's a couple that could,
that have read, that have expanded upon the material, and that have their own twist and add the extra information. So it's likely just a matter of time.
Yeah, there's definitely 2 off the top of my head that I know of that have been with me for a very long time. Could definitely, and have made their own systems and kind of made their own path using what I've taught them, and they play a very different style of game. And, they most certainly have a professional game now and can think for themselves. And and they evolved into different poker players, which is really great. I love to see that, and I'm still waiting for a second, series or whatever. I would love to, I would absolutely love that somebody else did, but so far we're, 3.5 years in, nobody's done it yet.
Well, give it time, all things come with time. I want to go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When you had the perspective of poker coming from a kid and then left poker and then came back, what was your fresh new perspective? Like, what was the difference there between the old you and the new you?
I had a different understanding of what needed to be done to succeed. Because when I was a kid, and I'll say post or a pre 25 years old. So pre 2010, when I was just a kid playing cards, it was just a game. I enjoyed it. Yes, I made a living, but I had no discipline, no habits, no good ones anyway. And, luckily I didn't have many vices. That was good. My worst vice in life at the time was like Chipotle. So that's okay.
Yeah. That's not the worst.
Yeah. Not the worst. And, but then after the military, I had the discipline to understand what it takes to stay healthy and the connection between the mental side of things and the physical side of things. And I'm not in the world's greatest shape anymore because, but like there's some basics that need to be done. Like you can't stay in a room at the Rio for 3 weeks and never see the sun. You can't do that.
Yeah. It's probably not going to be good for your poker game, your health. It's not good just for anybody for any reason.
No. And there was times like I had a house in Phoenix and a place in Vegas at the time. And I was going back and forth all the time. And there were plenty of times I'd get up, I'd literally get out of bed, jump in the car and drive to Vegas and then like not even check in, just start my session there. And I'm like, I wouldn't even go to the house and drop my stuff off. I'm like, and it took 3-4 hours to settle in before I was actually focused and like it was just leaking value everywhere. And, the Army gave me the focus, the discipline, the understanding what a good schedule looks like. And I treated it like a business. I said, if this is what I'm going to do for a living, I'm going to do it 100%, effective, just like we did in the Army. We didn't do anything 98.5% effective. It was 100% or all the way or none, like at all. And, it was just being responsible and learning what it takes to win and what it takes to learn. And then I also learned the discipline to understand what I didn't know, and in the military, at least in SF, when I got into that world, when you realize the vastness of what you don't know, it's a very powerful experience, when, there was I forgot the name of the scientist, but, or maybe it was a poet way back in the day. It said, the more I know, or the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything, or something to that effect. The more I know, the less I realize I understand.
Yeah. The more I learn, the more I realize that I just don't know anything about anything.
Yeah, something to that effect, like
right.
Whoever said that. But, and it was a powerful thing. When I get in the military here, I thought I was this high powered infantryman who could, cool. I could shoot and never miss. Great. But what does that means nothing, and then I get into SF and I learn all the weapons that I didn't know. And I learn all the security and, the bigger picture, and realize when I got in there, I was like, I'm nothing. I'm like, I don't know anything. And that was a very humbling experience and a necessary one too. So, applying that to poker once I got out, because once I realized that I was far more effective at the end of my military career playing cards than I ever was before. And I realized I'm like, well, this is just who I am. This is my path. If that's the case, if I can get out of poker, do the perfect 180, and go into the military and then get out and I'm going right back to poker. That's my
probably
that's my
meant to be.
Yep. That's my path. I'll take it. Definitely worth places to be in life.
What did your process look like post Army compared to pre? Like, what were the upgrades that you made logistically on just a day-to-day basis that allowed you to be more effective and to be a pro?
It's actually I have to give an indirect answer because my motivation when I got out was different than what you probably think. So I got out of the Army and I did not have custody of my daughter. So I have a 14-year-old daughter now that I have full custody of. And to make an excessively long story short, I didn't have much contact with her because mom took off and disappeared when my daughter was born. And so for the longest time, I didn't have much of a relationship with her. And so once I got out of the Army, that couldn't be stopped anymore. It was not exactly my choice. I'll just leave it at that. And so I went through the process to get partial, or at least half custody of my daughter. I used poker to fund that legal venture, which is a lot for everybody who's been through a custody battle, knows what that entails. Well, I came out the other side with 100%, and she's with me full time, and mom's not in the picture anymore. Good for my daughter, but that was always my tether. My reason for doing everything was to support her or support my daughter. And so once that I used that as motivation, I have to be better for her. I have to be, I have to be more effective. I have to always make more money so that I can defend her and stand up for her. And once that was done in 2018, it was January 2018 is when I was awarded full custody. And that allowed me to then focus. So all the time I spent trying to be better for that reason ended up making me a better player and a coach at the end. But I wasn't, 15, 16, 17, I wasn't coaching. I was just playing. And, I ended up refocusing everything towards that with that goal in mind, a singular focus on the future. And I never had that before. Yeah.
It's a much more powerful why than, double dipping at Chipotle on Friday, right?
It was, it was finally having a focus and a purpose, rather than just making money to spend it.
Absolutely. That's everything, by the way. Yeah. It's just everything.
And then realizing what people, using the Army to now think long-term. Whereas when I was a kid, prior to 2010, there was no long-term was next week. It was the dumbest thing ever. And now it's 5-year plan, 10-year plan. And it drives my partner nuts, who's a fixed limit Hold'em player, by the way. Drives her nuts. She's like, I don't even know what is going on next week. And you're talking about plans 4.5, 6 years from now. I was like, yeah, because we're going to get there.
It'll happen whether we want it to or not.
Yeah. The ability to look forward, the ability to understand that there was an immense amount that I didn't know. And being faced with the challenge of conquering my own ignorance was for what I view as a greater purpose, to take care of and support my daughter, was a very focusing thing. It focused me like a laser. And that's something I never had before the Army.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's everything when you're working towards something that's bigger than yourself. And ultimately money, the pursuit of just financial gain is a toxic goal in and of itself. It's not enough to power you. It's not enough to make you do the work that is going to allow you to thrive. You need something bigger than even prestige, bracelets, trophies, rings, all these things. None of that is enough to just keep you going day in and day out with focus and intensity.
Well, it is for some people. I mean, some people see that as the end goal, and that is their focus. But what is the intrinsic value to you in your future of it's the money and the things you do with the money that you earn. It's not the prestige or and I'll be the first person. I'm the most outspoken critic, criticism be damned about tournament play and, people talking about the people that in the poker world who equate bracelets and titles with prestige and knowledge. They're not the same thing. And, and it's but it depends on what you're going for. I play cards to make a living and to go better, move ourselves better into the future, move my family in the future, provide for a family. I don't give a damn who knows my name or who, and I don't care if somebody wants an autograph, at the table. That means nothing. I'll never be the guy to win a bracelet ever. I've played 5. Yeah. So it's I'll never be that guy, because
you might win it on number 6. You never know.
Maybe, but I can't win something I don't play.
Right. And, but if you won the tournament, would you be a better tournament player or would you be a better poker player than when you signed up? Absolutely not. You'd be the exact same, but you would have a bracelet. That's the difference, right? You wouldn't fundamentally be a better poker player, have more knowledge, have more wisdom, be able to coach players better by virtue of winning this bracelet. You may be able to charge some higher rates, right?
Maybe. So, I mean, that's a totally different topic too. It's the difference between cash and tournament.
Yeah.
I'm very, very biased against the cash, but that's for my goals.
Yeah, I'm biased too. I'm totally biased towards cash game players because that's what I've sought out my entire career was like just playing cash, staying under the radar, improving my game and being anonymous. That was,
there's that. Yeah. It
was
depends on what your motivation is.
Right.
You know, if you, I totally get the other side of it. If you're a regular guy, even if you're a pro, you know, if that's your field, that's your profession. And I get it. You know, I understand the appeal of prestige and like the appeal of being known. And, you know, that was something that I wanted until it happened. And then you're like, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I can't get into a game anymore. Like, you know, it's just kind of ironic that the thing you strive for is, you know, it becomes more detrimental to your career.
That was ultimately what I was getting at, right? Like this, the pursuit of like winning a bracelet, whatever it is. Like you don't want to pursue something, reach it, and then still feel empty and have nowhere to go because you did it. Like an Olympian that wins a gold medal and then they've trained their whole lives for that moment. And then, you know, a month later, they're like, well, now what? What do I do with my life now? Right.
Yeah. And that, you know, I can't personally attest to that. Like I haven't conquered anything, you know, I haven't conquered or achieved anything. Poker is just, you know, it's my profession. That's it. It's how I make ends meet. But like, it's not, you know, there's no secondary goal. As long as I can support my daughter and as long as I get her off to an adult life successfully, then after that, then I'll fire at some tournaments because why not? Because I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
In the meantime, not so much. But right now, I couldn't possibly enjoy tournament poker any less than I do now. It's the worst in my mind. That's just my opinion. Obviously, it's just my personal opinion.
I share the same opinion, but maybe for different reasons. I don't know. Like cash game, you're so incentivized to play fast. You're so incentivized to like get more hands in, and tournaments at various stages, you're incentivized to play slow. And I can't do it. I hate the pace of tournaments. It drives me completely insane that people are incentivized to stall and take like multiple minutes for each decision. That is something that like I've never been able to reconcile. Maybe I'm just an impatient human being, but like,
no, not necessarily.
Let's go, man. Like critical decision, tough spot. Yeah. Take all the time you need, work it out, make a great decision. Yeah. You got deuce 7 off under the gun on the bubble. Just throw your fucking cards in the muck, man.
No, I get it. But then, you know, that also goes into perception. It's like, you know, that it may be a big decision to somebody else. You know, keep in mind, 1-3 no limit is nosebleeds to somebody.
That's true. You know, that's a good point.
It's all relative. But yeah, I share your opinion on that one. I don't. When I play on the off time that the stars align, my schedule is open, and I can actually play a tournament. Keep in mind, this is very rare. I haven't played one in 2 years, but like, you know, the 2 or 3 I played when I would go with my friends to the series for the summer for the first like 3 or 4 years out of the Army, I'd always just play cash all summer. I'd fire like 3 tournaments, you know, and then I'd plan on firing 3 tournaments and it'd be like 1 because I was like, oh yeah, I hate this. That's right.
Yeah. I went to the WSOP one year and a friend of mine who is like one of my best friends in the world. We met playing cash. We had always played cash. And he's like, Brad, let's play a tournament. Like, let's play one of these 1,500 WSOP events. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to. He's like, yeah, Brad, do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. He kept on and on and on. And I'm like, fine, I'll play this fucking tournament. And so I'm sitting there and I'm in like level 2 or whatever. And I sent him a text. I'm like, yo, how you doing? He's like, oh, I'm playing cash. I already busted. And I'm like, you motherfucker. Like, you just wrote me. He's already out. Like,
you wrote me in. Like, nice hustle, bud.
Yeah.
Don't ask me for a swap next time.
Brutal. Then, of course, like I played for 10 hours and got it in with an overpair versus top pair, busted out, and realized again, yeah, I don't like these things. These are not very fun for me.
Yeah, and it's a tactical thing too with me. I mean, yes, it is a personal preference with everything you just said, the pace of play, the dynamics, the tanking, the Hollywooding, all the shenanigans that comes with it. Everybody's a genius. Like it drives me nuts to no end. Yes, all that is true, but it comes from a tactical point too. You know, like I'm more effective in cash games because I win more often. You know, you find me a tournament player that wins 75 or 85% of their sessions. It doesn't exist.
Not many cash game players exist. Like that's that's not a thing that exists in No Limit Hold'em for sure.
No, not No Limit. I meant Big O. Sorry, I meant split pot games. Cash. If you're winning 65% of your sessions in No Limit, you are crushing. But like it's just not a thing in Hold'em. But then there's this cash format of pot limit split pot games where it's really hard to lose. Like really hard. And when you're winning that consistently and winning an hourly rate that looks like a circus rate, Hold'em players will tell you, what's the metric? It's time to move up. It's 10 big blinds per hour over a really large sample. If you're winning that per hour of whatever game you're playing, you're crushing. It's time to move up, or you should at least consider it, but in Big O, you can win 30, 50, 80 big blinds per hour. Like that's normal. Like if you're playing 1-2 pot limit, you can win 70 big blinds an hour. 80 big blinds an hour in pot limit Big O. That's stupid. That shouldn't happen. But then that becomes the norm. And why would I want to play a tournament when, it's like, well, yeah, but when, you win a tournament, you're making 15,000 an hour. I'm like, okay, cool. It happens once a decade, whatever.
Yeah. What's your ROI? 20%. Cool.
Yeah,
so
cool.
I
Great.
played this $1,500 for $300 on average. That's not exactly exciting.
Yeah, and that's the point, is that the variance is so god awfully high. It's like I'm going to sit around and I have two friends that it's not their main living, but they're tournament junkies, right? That's pretty much what they do in poker for their bread and butter in poker. And then they have one final table a year probably, and they have one or two, and they have 1 6-figure cash a year every year, and they're like, oh, I make this much every single year. I'm like, yeah, you're also losing 11 months out of the year. Like I've had 5 losing months in 10 years. Like, tell me the difference. You have more stress. You have more variance. I don't.
Well, yeah, I think it's tournament players enjoy chasing the prestige, right? And I think that for some people, right. for some people that resonates with them, and that's how they're built. And no shame in that. I think that's a worthy pursuit as well. It's just different than my personal pursuit, but I respect it, right? I respect the person that can battle through these massive downswings with just grit and perseverance and the knowledge that keep firing and keep firing.
But there's a lot to the financial part of it too, and it's, I don't know a single tournament player that doesn't sell action. And you ask them why they're doing that. Well, I want to reduce the variance. Well, it's good for everybody. If you want to reduce the variance, learn to play cash. You won't have any variance. Well, you will, but not like that. If you want to reduce variance, play cash. Well, I want to take some of the gamble out of it. Play cash. It's like, I want to reduce I'm not bankrolled to play what my bankroll can't handle the swings. Well, you're doing it wrong then. Guess you solved your own problem. You don't have, bankroll's not there. But it just come to the realization that, you don't know too many cash players that play their regular game and will allow somebody to buy their action. And I used to do it all the time. Like when I was taking shots at huge games. I mean, there used to be a huge game here in Denver that I always sold action on. But because I was playing too big, very few poker players are bankrolled to play 100, 200 pot limit. And I don't care who you are. You're just not.
Right.
There's 10 guys that are properly bankrolled for that.
Right. Like I had Galfon on the show, and he's like, yeah, okay, I had an 800K roll and lost 400K in a day. And it was like, okay, now I moved down stakes. And it was like, it was pretty interesting hearing his sort of degen bankroll shot takes, but everybody that was playing back then at 501K, no limit on full tilt, 6 max. It's nobody's rolled for this. Everybody's shot taking, and some people are going to get really, really hurt. And there are a lot of people who are selling a shit ton of action to even be able to compete. But nobody's fundamentally rolled for stakes that big, or maybe Guy.
There's 12 dudes total. And then there's 12 dudes. That's it.
Very few people.
So, and it goes along with back to the original point, the foundation of the opinion, that you and I probably share. But it's if you're doing all these things to make it more like cash, why are you just playing cash? And
people just like tournaments. I don't know. Yeah. There's this allure of moneymaker and the multi-table tournament dream. I mean,
Yep.
I guess I've played my fair share, I guess, over the years, just messing around, but I don't know. I don't have that gene, the inclination to be fully invested into tournament poker. I've never felt that urge ever. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, I get it. I totally understand. There's a million. We could talk for hours on that alone.
For sure.
But it's just a matter of opinion. Whatever works for you works for you. But I don't. I'm still going to joke when somebody says, "Oh, he definitely he's a good player," when they're coming to play like a 5-5 no limit game. He's a really good player. He has a bracelet. I'm like, yes, so does Jamie Gold. Whatever. Like it doesn't make you a genius. It means you won one tournament one time.
Right.
Play a year and never have a losing month, and then tell me about it.
The thing is, like, the people that say that though are not ever great players themselves. So like they can't, it's not like they can't make it that judgment call as to like who's good. It's basically like, who do I think is winning most of the time? Well, that player must be good. Who has won a tournament in the past in their life? Well, that player must be good, right? That's really all that judgment comes down to.
Well, yeah. And that actually, I'm sure you probably have a good perspective on this too, is that what the public understands as good, and what the public, the general mind of poker understands as good and effective and winning player, and we probably, more or less calling back to that message that we exchanged a while ago, where is that standard lines achieve standard results. And, when, people talk about, what you're supposed to do and the maximum perception of what is good and what is effective is changes between players, so, and the bracelets and the titles of tournaments has become this metric of measuring. And it's not a thing. Like, how many tournament players do you know that are just atrocious playing cash or just like can't make it work, like can't do it?
Many of them.
Yeah. And that's not, I'm not trying to like validate the previous discussion, the previous opinion, but like,
well, they're different skill sets. Like one player invests all their life force and their energy into playing cash. Naturally, they're going to think that the guy who invests their life force and energy that's coming to the cash world is not a great cash player. And they're likely not, right? But you sit me down at a tournament and give me 30 big blinds, and I'm going to fucking fall to pieces. I don't know what to do with this stack. Like,
but give you 450, you're going to know what to do.
Let me start on level one. I'm going to crush everybody. Like, I've got no fear in level one, but at like 30 big blinds, I'm like, I don't know how to like manage this stack. This is a different skill set than what I'm used to.
Yeah, well, it's very true. And one of the most common tournament related Big O questions I get, actually it's the only one I get, and I get it a lot, is what do you think about Big O tournaments? I'll let you know when I play one. It's like I've entered into 2, I think, ever, and they did not go well because the game is just not meant to be played with 30 to 50 big blinds. It's just not. It's a post flop game. It's more of a chess game than it is anything else. There's no need to get it in with even equities. There's just no need to do that. Yeah. But when you're short, the shorter you are, the more necessary that becomes, thus creating a totally different game. And it's just not how the game was meant to be played. And like, I got an email from a guy, it was probably like a year ago, that says, I read your first and second book, and I really applied everything that I learned. And I've won, what did he say he won? It was like 2 or 3 rings or something, circuit rings, with playing Big O. Is I've won multiple tournaments in playing Big O, and it's like, it's all thanks to your book. I'm like, dude, there's nothing in my book that applies to tournament poker. That was all you. Like, isn't anything I've ever done that has nothing to do with tournaments. That was you. Don't give me any credit for something you did on your own, So it's like, it's just not my favorite thing. But as soon as the World Series has a bracelet, I'll probably fire it 3 years in a row until I say, fuck this. Just to do it.
Yeah. Just to have that experience. There is some fun too. Like, I have to admit that, like, there's no feeling like in a cash game, there's no feeling like going deep in a tournament, like making your way to the final table, the adrenaline, that energy, like that is a great and different experience than I feel winning, like, 1,000 big blind pot playing cash game. It's like the pot happens and it was like, oh, cool. Like that was unexpected. And you rack up the chips and like the night ends. Right. But playing down to the final table, I think there is a level of excitement there that's really hard to find, at least in my experience in the cash game arena.
I'll take your word for that. It's been a long time since I've played a tournament that went anywhere.
That's true. It's probably been a decade for me as well. So maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. But I know that like you have a chance to win. You have a chance to win like, 100x your buy-in, right? Whereas like in cash, that is almost never the case.
That's not happening. You're never winning 100x. Like it just, you may win 1,000 big blinds. I mean, 1,000 big blind wins it happens more often in split pot games than it does in no limit. I know that's kind of like the holy grail of a no limit session. And, I think I've done it like 4 or 5 times ever in my life of winning 1,000 big blinds in one session.
I remember a day that I won 30K playing 1020 no limit. Like that's 1,500 big blinds. That was a good day. But that was the only day that happened for me.
Yeah. Proportionally, I don't even know. I think about 1,500 is about the most. I think the biggest. I won 4,500 and 1-3 once. But there was actually true 1-3, not like 1-3-10 or something.
Yeah.
And like Council Bluffs or something on my way through a town. It was like, nobody was allowing straddles for whatever reason. So it was a true 1-3, but like those don't happen very often. I won 5K and 5-5 once, but I don't play those games very often too either.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the point is that in split pot games, you'll have a lot of huge winning sessions in no limit. And then a lot of like break even, and bankrolls are built on small wins. We all know this. But like in split pot games, when you're playing 5-5, you can routinely win $750 or like $800 to $1,600 routinely. And like, those are your small wins, where in like a lot of single pot games, you're going to have, 50 to 100 big blind wins after 8 hours. You're gonna have a lot of those. It doesn't happen very often in split pot games. When you run really, really bad, you might have an even, break even or lose a little bit. But it's just a totally different environment.
Yeah, you're making split pot games seem pretty good. Just high upside, low downside.
Oh, you want me to make that argument? We can go on that for an hour. I've made that argument through multiple channels and multiple people. When asked the question of why should I play split pot games when there's so many good hold'em games. And my first answer is it's meant to be more of a persuasive thing, but it's everything. You think about what people want as like, think of whatever the cliche 2-5 no limit grinder is. You picture that guy, right? The guy that's effective. He wins $45 to $55 an hour and has been for 5 years. He's a good reg. He wins his money, right? What is that guy looking for? He wants validation of his skills. He wants respect from his peers. He wants more consistency. He seeks to eliminate variance, or not eliminate, but reduce variance. He seeks to get a little bit better, and he also seeks to improve his edge over his opponents. He also wants his lines, his skills, his everything he does about his or her, their game to be viewed as professional or the best or above average, whatever they're looking for. All of that you can have in a game that has more skill involved than hold'em. It's just the truth. More variables equals more skill, because more variables brings more mistakes, more things to calculate. When there are more variables introduced in the equation, you inevitably introduce more failures, more mistakes, more problems. People will inevitably not rise to that challenge, and they will make mistakes, thus giving you more ways to exploit and maximize your own skill. And so that's what hold'em players are looking for. And here is this game, Big O, that's very much like the chess of poker. And I routinely tell people that, because the pre-flop round doesn't even matter, which is blasphemy to a hold'em mind. Like the pre-flop round does not have nearly the effect that it has in hold'em. Everything is determined on how well you play out the hand so that you can make the perfect decision on the river. And that's one of the first lines that I tell my brand new students is that is our goal when we're learning, is to get you to a point where you can play the hand in a way that allows you to make the perfect decision on the river. Now you think about that in a hold'em context. If you were able to, however you were able to do this, play an entire session where you made literally the perfect decision on the river, whatever that would be, a check raise bluff, or a value bet that got called, or you folded to a value bet, made the correct fold, whatever the perfect river decision was, you were able to make that every single time in your session. I guarantee you'd have 1,000 big blind winning session. Guaranteed. You'd have a crushing winning session. You would almost never lose. The only time you lost is when you got it all in with money, with cards to come, and then lost. You would have a very hard time losing more than 15, 20% of your sessions, probably.
Yeah.
That's big up.
It's interesting. Like, the skill gap seems to be fairly wide without a lot of knowledge that players can really easily find on their own. Whereas with other games like Hold'em, you can find knowledge and information and frameworks many, many, many places, right? When there's the absence of that, except for your books, right? Like,
as far as I know.
Yeah, it's hard. It's much harder for people to improve.
Sure.
Because, again, like, the value of coaching and coaches is that coaches are able to see the blind spots that the students don't see. So we're able to find mistakes that the student doesn't even know that they're making, right? Like, they would never bring this hand history to a coaching session because they would never know that they made a mistake. And so in a game with very limited information, mistakes are going to be plentiful. The blind spots are going to be huge. And whenever that's the case, there's going to be edge to be had for the players that are more advanced.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the things I do with people that, the people that I work with is that exactly that is learning to identify those blind spots, as you put it. And, the first conversation I have with most of new students after I learn their background is I tell them to obsess over finding mistakes. And that, for whatever reason, call it toxic masculinity, call it overinflated egos, whatever, of winning good intermediate players. And the type I'm talking about. The really good intermediates aren't quite professionals, but can think they got everything figured out, is the inability to recognize downside as mistakes, or even the willingness to look, and the players that truly become professionals by every sense of the word look to themselves for mistakes rather than pointing the finger at anybody else. That's the last thing that we as pros want to find, is that it was somebody else's fault, because I can't change that. I can't learn from that. I can't improve off of that. But if I find a mistake that I made, I can get better. So I tell my students, giving me a hand, and this used to happen a lot. It doesn't much anymore, but giving me a hand where, okay, so I had ace, 2-3 king. It was 3 bets before me. I jammed it. I 4-bet potted. Everybody called. I flopped ace 4-8 and 4 people jammed it all in. And then I paired the board and I scooped. Okay, cool. Like, that's no different than a Hold'em student coming to you and saying, so I had aces on the button and it was 5-bet before it got to me. I ripped all in and got 5 calls. I won. What did I do wrong? Good does that do?
Yeah.
It doesn't help me or doesn't help you. It doesn't help your game. It's a cool story. That's all it is. So I tell people,
it's not even that cool. Like, let's be honest. It's not even a cool story. It's a thing that happened at a poker
and I'm
table.
going to think about it the next 5 times I lose with aces, or the next 3 times I get a walk. I'm going to think about it and get tilted, because like, why didn't that happen? But like, it's this fundamental obsession with finding mistakes and finding fault in oneself rather than the game or luck or variance. And, I firmly subscribe to, I'm not believe is the right word, that we make our own luck. We make our own variance. We control our own variance. We control our own situations. And when you're in control of that, you zoom out on your graph and it looks like it's just a linear line. You don't have any of this stuff, a long term. But I said that's just a reflection of professionalism in my mind. We all seek to reduce variance. So the ones that actually do, are going to be professionals.
I don't mind variance. To me, it is what it is. Like, I think it's part of the gig, I guess. Sure. That's kind of part of why I fell in love with poker is embracing the variance. I think that one thing that pros do is they're just insanely curious, and they never settle on a decision that they think could have been better. Whether that decision made them money or they won the pot, they question whether there was a better move, a better decision that they could have found. And so just never settling on like good enough, always analyzing hands, even when you win them, not when you lose pots, but like, how do I maximize value here? Did I miss value? How do I play this hand better in the future? Like it's just never settling and maintaining that curiosity and not just like focusing on the times where, yeah, you lose a big pot, whatever. Oftentimes those hands aren't even the ones that are like the biggest sources of learning and finding ways to upgrade our game. It's a bunch of the other decisions that we make.
And that's yeah, absolutely. I cannot disagree with a word you said, and that's a really good point. And the irony of variance is that we all seek to eliminate it or reduce it, but without it, there'd be no poker. So you gotta, and in the military, we had a saying, embrace the suck, which was like, the more we could endure, the better the operator we would be, I guess, is a loose way of, we can't avoid the suck. So you might as well learn to love it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to sleep in a swamp for 48 hours. Nobody wants to be on a gun looking down an optic for 25 hours without being able to pee. Nobody wants that. But like, if you embrace it and enjoy it, like, you might learn something. It might be better for it. And that was, again, circling all the way back. Another huge lesson I took away from the Army is embracing the things that allow you to be there, and what it takes to get better and what it takes to learn from things that are inherently not cool.
Yeah.
Learning from the worst parts of the game.
I mean, I run a course every month called Preflop Bootcamp, and it's just on preflop and fundamental play. And like, I'm the first person to say on this show, it is not sexy. It is not necessarily fun, but it is necessary. If you want to upgrade your game, if you want to make an impact, it's step one. I can't change that, right? I can't make it sexier than it is. It's just necessary.
Infrastructure
to
week.
get going.
It's poker infrastructure.
Yeah, like,
gotta happen. Nobody wants to do it, but it's gotta happen.
Right. So like, may as well embrace that. And like, coming from a trainer and somebody that's creating content and stuff like that, it's like, well, what do I make that makes the highest impact, that generates the best results for my clients, for my students, for my customers? And you have to start with the fundamentals and the high frequency situations that just occur again and again and again. It's not necessarily sexy. It's not necessarily fun, but it's the first step towards becoming a winning poker player. You can't avoid it. You can't go around it. It's just necessary.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because what do you find if you teach Hold'em players, which I don't, by the way? I have 2 Hold'em students, but I'm never going to say that I'm a Hold'em coach, like, ever. So what do you find in students that blocks their ability to learn? Like, what are the mental blocks or the personality flaws, or I'm trying to find a less harsh way of putting it, like a
blind spots.
Yeah, something that disallows people from learning. The people that just never will get it.
Yeah, I have
found that is in Hold'em.
I have a theory on this because this drives me insane, right? Because again, I run this course, and there are people that take it and then they fail to execute when they're in the arena. Like, they do well taking the test, they do well, and then they get in the arena, and it's like they just fall apart, right? And I'm like, how is this happening? Why is this a thing? Why can't you execute on what we've trained? And over time, I've just come to the conclusion that we're human beings, and human beings are emotional creatures. And when our emotions flare up as it relates to playing cards, we get in these high pressure situations, and we just get emotionally compromised, and we forget our training, and we just start reacting, right? Like, that's sort of like the word fish to me, and recreational player, whatever, whale, whatever people want to call it to describe this type of player, to me, that's always felt like a bit imprecise, especially rec. I don't like the term recreational player, just because it's like, I know rec players that play at a higher level than me. They just have a job in the meantime, right? Like, it's not, you know what I mean?
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
So to me, like, those type of players are, in my mind, they're instinctual. The fish, they sit down at the table, they play based on how they feel in the moment. So they make emotional decision after emotional decision after emotional decision, and they feel like they're doing the right thing. They're making good decisions. They're just reacting on what their emotions are telling them. And I think that's a major blind spot that I've noticed in even my higher level students, where something will happen that they don't anticipate, that maybe they haven't trained specifically for. And the way that I do my coaching is they send me a video explaining their thought process. I will hear their emotions raise and then sigh audibly and then go through their thought process. And when their emotions get compromised, they create a narrative. They create a narrative that makes sense of the emotion and then they make a decision based on that narrative, which ultimately is not good.
Right.
They just forget all their training. And that, to me, like in Hold'em, it happens a little bit later in the decision tree, typically, because spots that are unknown to them, they haven't studied, they just kind of revert back to this instinctual type of player. That, to me, not understanding the effect that your emotions have and the fiction that your brain tells you while you're playing poker is the ultimate blind spot. It's the thing that, like, because you convince yourself that, like, the story that's being told in your head is accurate when it is absolutely not accurate. And I mean, to me, that to me is just like, it's human. It's humanity. We're emotional creatures. We can't get away from it. Nobody's born without an emotion. You can't play poker with no emotions. Like, it's just not going to happen.
There's a lot to that, and it's funny that we all, that you see the same problems in your Hold'em students as I do with my high-low students, and the ones that can't get over that emotional block. And like, if I were to answer the same question, like with high-low students, the people that can't succeed, that just don't get it, if I could oversimplify, are the ones that answer that after they ask me a question, I give them my answer, or I go into some giant friggin' monologue that lasts 3 times longer than it needs to.
Yeah, like the one that I just went on right there.
No, well, I do this like when I so want to over-explain everything, because I care. I take such personal responsibility for the people who want to learn from me. I feel so invested in their success. And but anyway, the people that respond to long explanations or any explanation of that, it's not an opinion. Oh, I need to clarify that. That's not an opinion. This was the wrong move for this reason and this reason. Here's the math behind it. And then they respond with, yeah, but, it's but this is why, or here's the other one, is the need to explain why you were wrong. And it's kind of like a validation thing. Like, I need to validate that I was correct in being wrong for some reason. And those are the students and learners or subscribers, whoever, that I found don't advance at all or very, very slowly. I mean, do you struggle? You see that in your Hold'em students too?
Absolutely. They hedge. They do a lot of hedging. I've actually made it a policy and I sometimes don't enforce my policy, but I try to enforce it as much as I can, that, like, if we get to a point in the decision tree that we should never be getting to in the way that we did, we just stop the discussion. It's over. You don't get to ask this question about the river because we're not supposed to get here that way. So you don't get that information, right? You fucked up 4 times getting here. Like, you want my opinion on the river? Well, I don't have an opinion because this is a
it's never going to be there. You should never be in this situation anyway.
Right.
It's funny you say that. A buddy of mine that spent the summer in Vegas, this guy lives in Ireland, one of the funniest human beings I've ever run across. So I don't remember who it was, but somebody he said was a big deal in tournaments. Don't ask me who it was. I don't know. Anyway, he's like, this guy's really, really good. Like, he's very effective. He's won all this, whatever. And they were having a discussion while we were going to have sushi in Vegas. And he's having this whole discussion, the long car ride. And I'm just like sitting here soaking up this information without saying a word. Because here's these 2 Hold'em geniuses just talking about things I know nothing about. And so this guy, whoever he was, explains this whole thing. I mean, a 10-minute thought process from start to finish. And my buddy, his name's Yuri, and he never said a word about it until the end. He's like, what do you think? What should I do here? And he goes, I don't know, man. And I'm not going to try and mimic his Irish accent, but it's like, I don't know, man. I'm just never going to be in that spot. I think you suck for even being there. You're just never going to be here. You shouldn't be here. You're lost, man. You're in Death Valley when you should be in Connecticut or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, we're never going to be here. So I don't see the point of even going into that.
It's so true.
Was like, click.
Yeah.
Go off.
And even advanced players, right? Like, this sort of arrogance of like, I ran really bad. I lost 15 buy-ins in this session. And then, like, going through a hand review, and it's like, but I did this, but I think it's okay because X, Y, Z. And it's like, No, you're rationalizing bad decisions. You're trying to make sense of you fucking up and torching stacks, and like, just accept it, right? Like, we don't need to rationalize our mistakes. We just need to accept that we make mistakes. We're fallible human beings, and move on. We don't need to justify them. We just try to do better in the future.
Yeah. And you're you're hitting on like 10 different points in an outline of a book I'm contemplating. is I'm contemplating writing a book about what I've learned teaching. And I've considered reaching out to a couple of other coaches that I know and be like, let's collaborate and make something this thick. But like, on that, you're like exactly what you're talking about, is that when we teach, we learn what makes us the things that make us fundamentally human and make us who we are as a species, not poker players, but humans as a species, are like they are like the biggest, like 1 through 5 problems that keep you from being a successful poker player. Ego, the desire to acquire recognition,
prestige,
the things we want that have no value, the respect. Every poker player wants to be respected for their talents, but it's the ego. The number one thing is that pulls on our ego is losing money. It's like we now have to justify and get defensive, and that leads to exactly what you're talking about, that downward spiral of just bad juju up here, and teaching people and teaching from an objective viewpoint. I did not play this hand, so now let's look at it from an outside perspective. If you can do that with your own game, you are a pro to be. And very few people do. At least that's my experience, is that very few people who do not make a living or at least play at a professional level do not do that. They're always pointing the finger at other people. They don't acknowledge how destructive our own ego can be in our poker process. And
extremely destructive.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, where it's like, if you can turn around and look in, what did I do wrong, even in the hands you did right, like the Galfont mentality of just always objective and always looking for mistakes, even if it's the tiniest minute betting difference, if you left value on the table in a hand you won. And that attitude, those of us who take that attitude, and it doesn't come natural. I mean, I've been told I'm pretty good at it. And like, all I do is every time I lose a hand, I do this a lot of times more in Hold'em, actually, in Big O, because a lot of stuff in Big O kind of plays itself. But like, when I play a Hold'em hand that I lose, or I get caught bluffing, or I whatever, something that didn't go right, look back, okay, what's the information I had at the time? Was this valid information? Did I act on a tell I didn't have enough confirmations on? Or did I assume anything? Did I jump to any conclusions? Did I make an emotional decision? Did I introduce a concept of revenge? I'm going to get that guy, or whatever, and then going through that whole thing. And, it's like 2 or 3 minutes of thought and like meditation on, what did I do? Was I right? And the result of the hand does not matter. And sometimes I do this with hands I won, and hands you lost. They should be the exact same process. And trying to install that in students who are just learning the game is not very productive. So I try to like wait till later to do that.
Yeah, it's a process that that leads you down that path that you reach eventually. I would say that like coaching for me I would never have made the connections that I have made as it relates to why people fail, like just the failure points of human beings. I never would have made the emotional connection had it not been for coaching and me just sitting at home meditating on, why do some of my guys get it and some of my guys not? What is the difference between somebody who plays poker and it makes sense and somebody who wants to play poker and it doesn't make sense? Like, what's happening there? Because something is happening. And I'm just the type of person that's so insanely curious and wants to know, like, why does guy A succeed and guy B fail? What's the difference? And how do I reach guy B? Like, are they reachable? Is it is it just something that I should not spend any energy on if they're not reachable? Just a waste of energy, right? Like, I don't know. And that's how I guess I make these connections as a coach. It's made me such a better poker player, just fundamentally understanding what's going on with the human psyche. And really, like, one thing that a coach will teach you very quickly, at least in my experiences, even when guys are playing high stakes and winning a ton of money, they still feel self-doubt. They still doubt their decision makings. They still question everything. Like there's this wave of like confidence and doubt, and everybody experiences that. So like just knowing that like this is human, this is a part of the human experience. I'm not the only pro in the world that's like gone on downswings and asked themselves at night, like, did I forget everything that I thought I knew? Did I just get lucky for the last decade? Like, what is happening to me right now? Everybody has these existential crises, and like, that's okay, right? I think that's a thing that I like sharing on this podcast over and over and over again, because like, we're not unique. This is another thing that I tell my students all the time. It may not sound very empowering, but like, as a human, you're not unique. You're not special. All the things you think and experience and feel, other people do as well. So yeah, I think there's, I don't know, a level of comfortability in just understanding that we're not on this venture alone. We're not experiencing this by ourselves. Everybody feels the same things that we do.
Look, I totally get it. You feel like being a lone wolf in your poker journey has hamstrung your ability to realize your full potential. So I'm about to give you a golden opportunity to plug into a supportive tribe that will be the poker family you've always wished you had. How much money would you give for 1 hour of interactive group coaching led by myself, Coach Thomas, and occasionally past guests of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast? For now, and this will absolutely change at some point in the near future, the price of admission to the live Poker Power Hour is 100% free. All you've got to do to get your invite is head to chasingpokergreatness.com and hop on the VIP newsletter. No more excuses, no more procrastination. It's time to take action and put yourself in position to turn your poker dreams into reality. I hope to see that beautiful face of yours in just a couple of days.
What have you found when you started, from the time before you started coaching to now? What did teaching other players teach you? How did you get better as a player being a coach?
How did I get better as a player being a coach? It's breaking down fundamentally why things happen and what is leading to these decisions, and knowing exactly why, right? Like, why do we have a pre-flop strategy? Why is that even a thing? This is a question that like I never asked when I was just a player. But then as a coach, I ask, well, why do we do this? Like, why do we have a set strategy that we follow, that we just believe, for lack of a better word, is going to earn money over the long term, right? Like, and then breaking it down and understanding like, oh, pre-flop strategy is just a model. Like, it's just a model that I follow that has proven to generate win rate in the pre-flop phase of this game, right? And all models, as it relates to this, can be broken with specific variables in play, like just different player types. You're going to deviate, you're going to change your model. But basically just like fully understanding why we do the things that we do, the stumbling blocks that my students encounter, how to be more resilient as a poker player, for instance. Like, I think affirmations are a big deal as it relates to poker. If you're playing poker and you play for 5 hours and you get stacked in a spot where you feel like you shouldn't have been stacked, right? It's very easy to say, okay, I'm a loser. The score is 0-1. And now I just suck at everything. When the reality is, like, you've probably made 15 great decisions leading to that point that you've never affirmed to yourself. You've never celebrated. You've never given yourself permission to say, like, that was a fucking great value bet. Like, put a point on the scoreboard for me, right? Like, but I think, again, that's human nature. We dwell on the negative, and like self-flagellation was how I powered my poker career for the first 6 years. Just brutal assessment of my play every day. So I won 10 buy-ins. I should have won 11 and a half. Like, what the fuck were you thinking in that 1.5 buy-ins that you left on the table, right? Like that was my mentality. You know, it wasn't healthy. It wasn't great, but that was what I used. So
do you win more? I mean, are you more of an effective player now than before?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm more at peace. I'm more at peace with the whole process of like, I'm sitting here, I'm making good decisions. I know fundamentally why I'm doing it. And win, lose, or draw, like, I know I'm a favorite in the games that I play in. So like, I have peace with that and I can let it go. at the end of my session. And like being able to let go of those emotions when a session ends is ultimately just, you can't put a price on it. It's so huge.
No. And that's, that's one thing I learned coaching, oddly enough, is that to be at peace with your decisions, and before I started coaching other players, there's always that aspect of doubt of looking like, was what I did right? Was it correct? Was it mathematically correct? Well, I don't know. I'd have to go look at it. I have to go figure it out, but now in the working on 3 years now of coaching high-low players, I think 4 years. I don't know. It's been a while. When people work through, they give you a situation, you work through it, and you're learning along with them too. Because if when somebody says, "Hey, what's the equity on this?" Or I'll give you an example. Like a good example is that I was down in Austin, Texas, a month and a half ago, somewhere in there, and somebody came up to me and asked me a question. Hey, they were in a bomb pot, so 2 boards, 5 cards, and someone's like, "Hey, which hand's the favorite?" Which hand's the favorite of, I had this, and this. He had this, and this. Here are the 4 cards on each board. Now, which one's a favorite? And my answer sounded a little smartass. I had no intention of being smartass. It was just like an honest answer. He's like, "So how do you figure this out?" I'm like, "That depends on how good you are at factoring binomials." And he's like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Well, it's 2 equations. It's 2, you have to, and you factor them together." And he's like, "Wait, like math?" I'm like, "Yeah, like math, bud." He's like, "Well, what's the answer?" I'm like, "I don't know. Give me 5 minutes. I'll figure it out." But like, the point is that when this situation comes to me and I have to figure it out, I go through the math, and I actually have to write it down and figure it out and use the calculators and go through this. And when I tell him what the answer was, is that he was right. And this hand was the favorite. And I learn along with him too. I just learned that situation is now what it is. And I know mathematically, and, I don't have to worry about separating fact from opinion now. I know what the fact is, and I know the difference.
Yeah.
I've found that a lot, that is a big deal. If you can separate that, the difference between fact and opinion in poker is a big deal. I mean, do you deal with that with a lot of your students, like people that clearly need to define what's a fact and what's an opinion?
I mean, I guess it's just, everything ultimately is an opinion. It feels like, especially as it relates to like the variables of poker, it's like, I don't know. Even when I try to prove something, it's impossible to prove because I need to model my opponent's strategy exactly. And the only way to do that is to strap them down in a chair and like torture them to get there. And they may not even know what their strategy exactly looks like. Right. So like, it's hard. I mean, I think that some spots where, one example is I had a student, we were talking about facing check raises on like basically a 2-1 gap is what I called them, because I love specificity as it relates to language. Like people want to say, "Oh, low boards." Well, yeah, but like, what is a low board? Like there's different versions of low boards. So like a 2-1 gap is like 8-5 tray, right? Like 8-5 tray rainbow. Like we face a check raise with 8-5 tray. Like what's the best way to proceed and position with our range? And then, what turn cards are like the death turn cards. And so I don't know the answer to that. Coaching is also like you said, it's as somebody in my group, a high level player says, it's a shared journey of exploration between student and coach. Like coaches don't have all the answers, right? We love finding answers. And by the way, that's the first sign that you need to find a new coach is if they never say, "I don't know," because
that's a good point.
Yeah, because there's so many spots where you don't know, but it's like, yeah, okay, let's look at these 2-1 gaps and see what happens. Like, let's create some models and kind of pick it apart and try to create a path to play these board types better. And like, then that's his homework. And he comes back like a NASA rocket scientist with all of this information. And it's like, sweet. Like he's basically, I gave him the homework assignment and I get to learn along with him. And yeah, it's just,
that's a good point. That's a great quality behind instruction in general. And, I routinely, so my dad lives in Phoenix. I'm about to move down there, I believe. And anyway, he has been a consultant, a business consultant in like a food safety and regulatory industry for a very long time. And what him and I do are essentially the exact same thing. And you as well, when we teach people, when we instruct people. And one of the things that he says is that the consultants that came before him that the company, the client has hired, have told him routinely is that I worry when a consultant thinks they know everything. And it's weird to have somebody else in a totally different industry who, he knows nothing about poker other than what I've told him. It comes to the same conclusions that we do about instruction and coaching and teaching. And that, when somebody has the ability to say, I don't know the answer to that, they have the ability to learn and grow. And I found a lot of poker players don't ever achieve that until they become at an intermediate level. They don't achieve the ability to say, I don't know the answer to that question. I also don't know how to find it. Yeah. And, you can't really just Google your problems in poker a lot of times. You can, but you're going to get a lot of bad information from, the forum trolls of the world.
You can ask the crowd, but the crowd is just going to agree on the person who sounds the smartest.
Yeah. And they're also going to agree on what's socially acceptable, and that goes back to something we talked about earlier, is that the socially acceptable, the crowd opinion, the consensus among the group is almost never the correct answer. Because if it was, everybody would be a professional, and this mantra that I've now repeated twice is that common lines and common attitudes will achieve common results. Standard lines achieve standard results. So if you want to have the same results as the crowd, which generally is not a professional game, then by all means, do what everybody thinks is the right thing to do. And one of the biggest things I point out to Big O players is something I put into, I don't remember which book it was, one or two, is that the cardinal sin of high-low is limp 3-betting pre-flop with aces. Because in a game that is naturally opaque in the early parts of the game, like early parts of the hand, pre-flop and on the flop, you cannot put somebody on 5 cards ever. I don't care who you are. Like, I can't do it like at all. And you most certainly can't do it pre-flop. So what benefit could you possibly find behind giving away information where none can be had? And, in a game where there's billions of combinations of hands to play, why would you narrow it down to like 12? And you see the same thing with Hold'em players. They do the exact same thing in the exact same method. They have this idea in their mind that they need to limp 3-bet queens plus and just go bananas with ace king suited for whatever reason pre-flop. And they don't think past that, and they don't have the understanding of the value that they're losing by giving away that information.
Most of that stuff, I think in today's it comes out of like the turn or the river, where It's like, okay, you've chosen to take a line that only a handful of hands you ever play will ever take that line. And then it's just a matter of like, is this exploitable and in which way? So is it exploitable by calling because they are only taking this line with bluffs, or is it exploitable by folding because they just never have a bluff? I mean, and that's something that like, that's where people back themselves into corners and hold them. It's just deeper in the decision tree. They take lines that they only have value or they only have bluffs. And like, that's it. That like, you're just done. When you do that and you're playing against a clever opponent that's able to hand read and put the variables together, you're toast. You got no hope.
Yep. I call that concept transparency. It's if what you're doing is fully transparent, even the dealer knows what you have, you done messed up. Like,
most of the time, I will say there's one exception. It's when you're playing somebody who is totally oblivious, right? That's the exception. Like, to the observant opponent, don't, giving away that information. Like I like that concept transparency. That's a great term. I'll attribute it to you, but I'm probably going to steal it.
By all means. There's no patent on anything. If you say into transparency in Big O, you might want to cite my book, but other than that, you're good.
But yeah, like, I've played pots, I've seen pots where it's like, I'm playing against a massive whale, and like the cocktail waitress knows that like I'm never bluffing here, but like my opponent does. So like, who cares? I mean, that's another thing too, where I think people let opinions and social pressure get to them, where it's like, I could have bet like 3x pot here, but I don't want to look like an idiot when I do it because I never am bluffing. I only have value. And it's like, dude, make the decision that makes you the most money. We're not here.
Yep.
We're here to make money. We're here to maximize win rate,
Yeah.
not to look cool to this person across from me. Right. So like, it doesn't matter. Like I said, if the cocktail waitress knows you're not bluffing, as long as your opponent doesn't know, maximize it, go for it.
That's one of the things that when I do play extended Hold'em sessions, I find myself doing this a lot in Arizona during COVID times. So that's all the games that are running. And, I see a lot of the regular Hold'em pros, or I don't want to classify them as anything, but the regulars who generally win, they get stuck doing things the way they do things. And they also attribute, I call this the Philhelmius syndrome. So it's when you automatically assume and truly believe that everybody knows everything you know, and that you expect people to act on knowledge they don't have. And so when I tailor a line, and I do this, like you have to do this in every game you play, is that when you tailor a line and trying to make it the most effective line you can, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you perceive. We tailor our lines based on them and what they perceive. There are so many times I'll text my girlfriend, who's also a professional. She plays fixed limit. And I explain a line and she's like, how did that work? I'm like, I don't know. This is the dumbest line ever. It shouldn't ever work, but it just did. Because we take a line that manipulates our opponent's weaknesses, not a line that we perceive to be weak, strong, acceptable, whatever. It's all about them. And I could play the exact same hand 4 different ways. You do this. I'm sure you've seen the same situation. You play the exact same hand 4 different ways and get 4 different results, all of which may have been correct, but all of which were dependent on your opponent.
Yeah.
There's lines you can't take against a pro, and you most certainly can ram up somebody's Gamgees that is played 3 times in their life. Like you tailor your actions to your opponents.
Right. It's all about their perception. It's not about what you believe to be your reality, because I think that like even our realities are biased and not accurate. So like it's just about the perception. And a story that just sticks with me was in Foxwoods early on, friends with Vanessa Selbst, went to visit her. We played together and she made a comment, just like an offhand comment when we were playing. It was like, I always know what you have in the pots that I'm not in with you. And I'm like it just kind of like clicked, like, yeah, that's poker, compliment. Right? Like that's poker where I'm playing.
Compliment.
You know what I mean? Like I was so arrogant and stupid back then that like I didn't even I didn't even see it for the compliment that it was, but it was like that's what poker should be, right? Like your friend that you play against, if you're playing against lesser competition that's weaker and you're exploiting them, they should know what you have every time, and it doesn't matter. But when you're playing against them, it should be less transparent, right? Like they should be guessing. That's just the nature of playing cards against human beings.
Yeah. Transparency is a fun one to mess with, because there's plenty of times where you have to avoid it. I mean, you should, and I find I'm avoiding it most of the time in Hold'em, but like in Big O, there are times that you just have to disregard it because the math dictates so, and you're okay with explaining, basically turning your hand face up, because that's what makes sense, and it's the same thing. And, you can find that situation a lot in Hold'em too. If you flop top set on a really gross board, I don't know, I get king 9-8, 9-8 of hearts, and you have 2 black kings or something, it's like, and you get a lot of action, you can justify turning your hand face up. You're not going to be trying to, trick people into doing a lot. If it's a multi-way pot, there's a lot of times where, you're just going to turn it face up and slam it in the middle. And that may be a bad example, but
I think it is. I'm never turning over top set when they can have smaller sets.
I'm trying to relate to like, I'm trying to give you a Big O situation related to Hold'em, but like
it's a tougher like equity distribution.
Sure.
Maybe you have a straight flush draw or something in Hold'em, and it's like, okay, whatever. Like let's get the money in, and here's my cards. Best of luck to you.
Yeah, or you have the hand that everybody suspects you to have, and the situation dictates that you're not trying to hide anything. You just basically, this is what it is. We're too short to worry about it. Make your decision. You know what I have.
I think the shortness actually creates more opaqueness. So like 100 big blind poker, I think typically Hold'em at a high level, you're rarely so, I guess, nutted up that you're just transparent in that you have like only great hands. So I think that like in spots in Hold'em, when you only have great hands, you've probably fucked up somewhere along in the decision tree.
Sure. Oh, of course.
Like live poker or like poker at like 500 big blinds deep or 1,000 big blinds deep, you just get situations where it's like bet 3-betting on the turn, and everybody and their mom knows you don't have a bet 3-bet on the turn bluffing range, and you just do it to do it, and that's just what it is.
Yeah, or a river check raise.
Sure.
Like people that like there's so I found that, I mean, I never really considered that to be out of bounds, until I started playing Hold'em in Arizona, where it was like for some reason that was an alien concept. Nobody did it.
Yeah, nobody. Well, that's the thing. Weak players don't like. That's
it just nobody did it. I was like, and they're like, oh, you have to have this. I'm like, or not, but it's transparency is inherently volatile and also relative. What is obvious to me is concealed to you, and vice versa. What is blatantly obvious in your face, I've never have seen before. And being able to translate that into an action that is profitable is a skill in itself. And one that I try to teach students, but it is a flawed process. Obviously, it's a very subjective process.
It's tricky. And like what you mentioned there about like in Arizona and river check raises being like never bluffed or dramatically under bluffed, like that's a hole that's available to exploit, right? Like that's an opportunity to either bluff some folks out who are dramatically overfolding by check raising rivers, or to overfold yourself to river check raises because it's so naturally under bluffed. I think that like those spots, those are the points in the decision tree as it relates to no limit Hold'em where the value is. Like one of the smartest poker players and minds that I've ever met in the world told me 10 years ago that like you're always going to be able to find an edge in Hold'em. It's just not going to be early in the decision tree. Like you're just going to have to get deeper to points, to places that are uncharted territory for lots of people and try to find the gold there. Whereas my assumption and how you're describing Big O, there are a lot of these uncharted territories, or the perception is they're uncharted when the reality is that there is a model there that gets the gold.
Well, there is yes, there is. You are correct in that assumption or that finding. Big O has so many variables and so many. Every situation is different, and the complexities of mistakes are vastly larger. Like you keep bringing up the decision tree, and I know exactly what you mean, if not by that name, but like the spectrum of that butterfly effect is like 5x in Big O because there's so many more things to think about, and I find that getting to those empty places and finding the gold, as you say, there's a lot more paths to do that, than I found in Hold'em. Maybe that's my own ignorance. I'm not nearly as good of a Hold'em player as I am a split pot game player. But like,
I would say that if you've invested your time and your energy, you've written 4 books on this exact subject, right? Like in a place that's underexplored, understudied, undereducated, you're going to find more nodes that give you EV. I mean, if I could go back and play poker in 1980 against the best no limit Hold'em players in the world, it would be a money printing machine. Every node you would be finding just tons of value everywhere you look. But like the game gets more advanced. Players learn. They shore up those decisions in the decision tree early on. You have to, as I'm fond of saying, drag them out there in the deep waters and drown them in places that they're unfamiliar with.
The Stu Unger line.
Is that Stu Unger?
No, I said no. The line, like a line in poker. The doing all of that was what Stu Unger did, back in the old days.
Exactly, because he could think about. They had no idea. They're just like, trying to kind of feeling around in the dark.
You ever thought about what whether or not his greatness was just being 20 years ahead of his time, or whether or not, like, do you think if we brought any number of 12 people, or take your pick of 100 top pros in any field, and brought them back to 1985, you think they'd have the same success he did?
Probably.
You think so? Why?
You mean the top players now, if they existed in the 80s?
Yeah, but they can't bring anything with them. Like they have to bring just their knowledge. Like there are no computers back then. There are no phones. There's no, there was like 3 books on poker and 2 of them were Super System. Like,
yeah, I don't know. But I don't know the answer. It's really hard to know, right? Like it's really hard for me to know what is learned ability and what's built on a foundation of knowledge that was existing and available at the time.
Yeah.
I would say this though. I would say that had Stu Unger lived in today's day and age, I think that he would not have been as successful as he was in the 80s.
I think I agree with that, yeah.
Because I think he was too emotionally compromised to find sustained long-term success in today's poker environment. I did a greatest of all time little silly Twitter tournament with brackets and everything like that. And I think I had 64 players, so there were 4 brackets of 16. And Stewie, I put as the 3rd seed in his bracket and caught a lot of shit for ranking him 3rd and not 1. And in actuality, I had discussions with, I think it was Berkey. We were talking about it, and I had Stewie ranked much lower than 3, actually, from the stories that I've heard of Doyle saying that, well, it's a cardinal sin, right? When Doyle says Stewie was a bad cash game player, that sort of automatically knocks him down a bunch of pegs in my mind. So like, it's all perception. I don't know if the crushers of today could. I think there's one guy that I think could have, and Victor Blom. I think that dude could have been successful at poker. He's kind of like Stewie in his volatile nature, but like guy that just. He's like, oh, cool. I'm going to start playing PLO. Yeah, I'll just start playing 500, 1,000 to kind of learn how this game works, right? Like, it's like, who is this person? He wrote his own playbook. Anybody that can write their own playbook, I think, could have had success in the 80s.
Yeah.
But it's hard to know.
I would love, I don't personally know anybody who knew Stu Unger. I've played with people. Like, I've played cards with Lane Flack a few times who knew him. I never really talked to anybody that was, a dominant force in the day back then. But that, that would be one of the questions, if that ever came up. I would love to know the answer to that. Is that how would you think that, and vice versa, if you were to teleport 1981 Stu Unger to 2020, how would he do? Or 2006 or whatever, anywhere after post poker room, how would you think he would have done? And then vice versa, you snap any of us or whoever you want back to 1985 or 1980, that how would they have done? I feel I might be a little biased on that because I've played with plenty of people who've been playing cards since the 70s. I haven't found too many who cut it. I guess that, they're like stuck in their ways, or, that's not like a knock to the old guard, but like
their path is well worn and traveled, and they don't adjust. It's the old man coffee type situation where the old man's been winning for 10 years with their specific particular style, or 20 years, and they stop learning, and the game passes them by, and they become the old man in the neighborhood that shakes their fist at the young kids like, what are you doing?
Get off my lawn. Call my limp 3-bet.
Yeah, get off my lawn. Why are you raising my blind? The shills, like the shills that start games early in the morning where it's like I raise their blind and like they just glare at you for a minute for raising their blind. It's like, dude, what's going on? I know
exactly what you mean. There's this dude in Austin, Texas, who I won't name drop, but he's like that, the old guard. It was just a crusty, mean old guy. And one time some hero of poker got him super high one time. And I actually got an honest statement out of him for like once ever. That wasn't, some dick thing to say. Like, and I said, he mentioned something along the lines, he got involved in a conversation of how poker's changed. And somebody said, you can't do that anymore. And, he's like, well, now everybody's thinking with their coaches and their books and their computers, and internet ruined poker. And I, against my better judgment, engaged him in conversation. But like, I asked him, I was like, what did you have to do, in 1985? What did you have to do to win? what was the most you had to study? And he's like, study? Oh, I just showed up and played craps on my break. And, he's like, all I had to do was just not give away money and I'd win. And it's just like, click. I'm like, here's the epiphany is that back then all you had to do was not suck and you were a pro.
Right. So
and
why put in work?
Yeah. And it's just like, and I'm like, wow, that carried over 35 years later. And now you're trying to play 12% of your hands and wonder why you never get paid.
Yeah, you never evolved. You never studied. You never grew. You never put your time in doing the shitty ass work that's necessary to be successful. How do you expect to reap the rewards, right? Like everybody wants the fruits without putting in the effort. But like that's not how poker works or the real world. You just got to work.
Works. Anything worth attaining is by definition difficult, or it should be.
Exactly. Greg, we've gone a little bit over the standard CPG episode. I've missed 100 questions here. I of my normal questions. So
let's do it again. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, let's do it again. I would love to have you back. And we'll just close down with a couple questions here. And
sure.
What's a project you're working on right now that's near and dear to your heart?
Project near and okay. Well, there's plenty of projects I'm working on, none of which are near and dear to my heart. But getting my daughter through high school, that's near and dear to the heart. But as far as poker goes, I am in the process of, as soon as I move, I'll finish up book number 4 and I'll be done with that series finally. That I hope it'll be out by the end of the year, but probably early next year.
Yeah.
Also my instructional video library is getting a little bit hard to handle. It's, I have over 130 videos for just Big O and PLO8. And I'm going to be migrating to a streaming platform of some kind, or a YouTube channel or something where people can pay by the month rather than 6 months or a year that I do now, because you can download my videos. So I don't want somebody to pay for a month and download them all, and take off. But eventually doing something like that, and trying to, same thing I was doing from day one, is I want to grow the game. My number one priority is growing Big O and high-low games and trying to get Hold'em players to understand that there are bigger and better things out there, and that you can benefit your Hold'em game. You want to get better at single pot, learn to play a split pot game and learn to play it well. And you're going to learn concepts that you didn't even know existed that will help your Hold'em game.
And I guarantee you that in this conversation, you've at least reached thousands of people who probably primarily only play No Limit Texas Hold'em.
I seriously hope so.
The pitch is good, right? There's edge to be had if you're willing to start. The beauty of learning different games is that when the skill gap is small, like when there's not much knowledge, you can get better to a higher level of play much more quickly than like Hold'em, where you have so much to learn just to get the foundations of the game. You play a game that's understudied, you can just hop right in after learning you can be like that dude in the 80s that was like, if I don't give it away, I win money, right? Like that's not a bad spot to be in by playing some of these different games.
Yeah, it's a lot of projects working on, but that's a big one. I really would like to grow the game. And I don't know, I feel personally obligated to do so. I don't know why, but we've had we as the poker community, we as poker players, Hold'em, everybody has had so much taken away from us, with the Black Friday thing and now with COVID. And it seems like every 5 years something happens that, takes from the poker community. And, I don't want to get too philosophical on it, but I feel kind of like if I have a way to expand people into other games and bring more players into the game, then that's what better way to use talents, exposure, whatever, to grow the community. And, it's not just a game we play. It's not just a profession. And we all want better things for the community. And, anything I can do to achieve that or point towards that direction, is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, man, and it's a worthy, noble cause. And I think too, as poker players, I talked a lot about emotions earlier, and the reality is that you play a game that is technically it's not a zero-sum game, but a zero-sum game where your job is to stab your opponent in the neck and watch them bleed out on the felt. And you do that long enough, you having a high emotional IQ or EQ, it's going to have an effect on you. So giving back is ultimately very, very fulfilling. And, this is the why that drives this podcast, the why that drives my coaching, the why that drives my content is I love giving back. I love helping guys. I love seeing it click for people and them making the jump. Like that's what I live for, and ultimately gives me more fulfillment than blindly playing cash games ever has. And I'm very thankful and grateful for that opportunity.
It is a very rewarding, the most rewarding feeling in poker I get is not when I have my biggest winning set. It's not when I win 19 sessions in a row or, go 24 for 25 in a month or whatever. It has nothing to do with my results. The most fulfilling and rewarding is when I get a phone call from somebody I've taught. And I'll give you an example. Hey, I got this phone call in November with a student who signed on in January. And he said, I want you to know that in the 16 hours of coaching I paid for you, that X amount of dollars led to me paying for my college tuition for both of my kids. And he's like, I couldn't have done that without you. Or I had another student that said, I signed on with you 9 months ago and I just used my winnings to buy a bar. And it's like, that will change my life. Thank you. And it's like, they're just learning a game, but it's like, that's the most rewarding feeling I've ever had in poker. Or when I get some random email, somebody, hey, I read all 3 of your books and I won 20,000 in 2 weeks in a 5-5 game. It's all because of you. It's like, no, you did that. But that's the rewarding. Like there's just no more fulfilling thing in poker is that seeing somebody change their lives because they learned for 16 hours or 8 hours of poker or whatever.
Absolutely.
And it's so rewarding. I love it so much.
Same. And for folks who would like to possibly get coaching from you, who would like to investigate Big O, the split pot games, where can the Chasing Poker Greatness audience find you on the World Wide Web?
So you can find me on Twitter, Greg Vail 85, or my website, doublesuited.net. It's more of a retail or a contact form. I don't have any content up there. It's just to sell my books and get a hold of me. My books can be found there or on Amazon or anywhere you find your books. Audio books are only available through like Apple, Amazon, and those regular places for audiobooks. I mean, I'm sorry, ebooks, not audiobooks. Poker audiobooks are hard. Imagine saying 5 cards with a board with audiobooks.
I made an audio pack for pre-flop boot camp because some of my guys are auditory learners, and
you could do that. Yeah, you could do Hold'em for audio, but
it was
pre-flop only.
I thought, this is going to be easy. I'll just knock it out in a couple hours. And it was like,
nope.
I'm describing ranges over and over and over again. It was like, oh my God, I hate this.
You have to write down.
This was not good.
I learned that the hard way in like the second coaching call I ever had. It was like when I have to write down every hand because, while they're explaining it to me, there's no way I can just think about it and talk about it. Audiobooks, especially Big O, is not happening.
Yeah, not happening.
It cannot be done.
Man.
But yeah, other than that, my library is available personally through me. You can email me at gregvail@doublesuited.net and I can get people access to that.
Perfect, man. And I'll put the links to click through on the show page. So you can just click through the show page, find Greg, get some coaching. Man, it's been great having you on. I'm very grateful for your time and your energy, and can't wait to do a round 2 where, we get into the more standard Chasing Poker Greatness questions that we just totally bypassed today.
I know it. Sorry, that tends to happen. I always want to ask some questions too. So we end up talking for hours. But yeah, let me know. Let's do it again.
Perfect, man. Sounds good. Take care.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you have yet to subscribe to the show, please take a second to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. For more content from me, Coach Brad, please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/enhanceyouredge, and I'll see you next time.